Colonialism, along with capitalism, causes climate change.
We can't just say that colonialism is a thing of the past. You can't deal with the climate crisis without dealing with these systems of power.
Fossil fuel companies, part of the most profitable industry the world has ever seen, got this money from subjugating the global south just as much as they got it from oil and gas. All the corporations that are wrecking the global south are headquartered in the UK. We have a special duty to do our part in the global fight for climate justice.
Global justice means getting to the root causes of how these systems were created and what they're doing, and fighting with the people who are the most affected.
If we begin to build those links with activists in the global south, this is something that can build up for a whole new kind of movement.
This is a time to change everything. We can get to the root of tackling it. We can deal with all these things together.
We have run out of excuses and we are running out of time.
We're looking at mass starvation within 10 years.
The reality is we're sleepwalking into a catastrophe.
Change is coming, whether you like it or not.
You're listening to the Extinction Rebellion podcast. I'm Marijn van der Geer.
And I'm Jessica Townsend.
And we are with a live audience as part of XR's Decolonise, Decarbonise programme at Vault Festival. We're recording this in Vault's Time for Change space, right in the heart of the festival, which has many shows going on at once. So you may hear some other sounds bleeding into the interview. So we're in an installation space in association with Restless Development and also Staging Change. So do look them up for more information.
Decolonise, Decarbonise is a series of talks and panels with a focus on decolonisation and climate justice. And we are thrilled today that we have two speakers who are working in this area of global justice, Rosanna Wiseman and Cameron Joshi. And they're here from Global Justice Now. Would you mind explaining what your organisation does?
So Global Justice Now works on different social and economic justice issues, tackling the root causes of poverty. So we've been going on since about the 70s, and we do different campaigns around like trade justice, climate justice, and also we're focusing a lot about freedom of movement at the moment. And I personally work with the Youth Network, so we go into different universities, we work with young people across the country, and we set up autonomous groups, getting young people to talk about these issues and to campaign on them.
I'd say, just to add to that you could say our motto is solidarity, not charity.
And what's your role, Cameron?
I work with Rosanna on the youth activism team, so we do quite similar jobs trying to get young people involved in activism around all these issues.
So we're here today at Vault Festival. This is the Extinction Rebellion part of the festival, so to speak, and it's Decolonise, Decarbonise. What is the link between colonialism and climate change, Cameron?
Well, I'd say that colonialism, along with capitalism, causes climate change. So if you look at past examples, you can see that, for example, in the Belgian Congo in the 19th century, Belgian Congo was the modern-day Republic of the Congo, and it was controlled by the King of Belgium at the time, Leopold II, as his private kingdom. And the Belgians used it to ruthlessly extract raw materials like rubber and timber. And to do this, they would cut the hands off of any Congolese people who wouldn't meet their quotas. And this extreme brutality resulted in the deaths of half of the entire population of the Congo. And it also was the same mentality and system which led to a huge widespread deforestation of the Congo, which has impacts that last till today. I think in that example, you can see that the systems that steal wealth from the global south the global south being another name for developing countries, the systems that steal that wealth cause climate change. And if I give you a fact that shows this, over $2 trillion in wealth is transferred from the global south to the global north every single year, and that's in net terms. So that is $2 trillion more than any aid or any investment that goes the other way. And it's extraordinary. And most of that money comes from the extractive industry, and these are the same industries that cause half of all global emissions and 80% of all biodiversity loss.
Do you mind if I ask a subsidiary question to that? It was very moving what you said about the Belgian situation, but many people might say colonies haven't existed for a long time, so why is it relevant now?
I'd say the system of colonization or imperialism does definitely still exist. So if you think about what the aim of having colonies was, it was to subjugate entire societies so that their materials could be taken from them very cheaply. This still goes on. So I think one of the most potent examples that I heard was in the 90s in Ogoniland, which is a region in Nigeria, in the Niger Delta, which used to be an extremely biodiverse place on the planet. Shell, the oil company, discovered oil there when it was still a British colony. And even though Nigeria became independent, Shell's thirst for oil didn't stop. They still clamped down on indigenous resistance in the Ogoni people. And in a famous case in the 90s, the Nigerian government, the Nigerian judiciary, sentenced Ken Saro-Wiwa, who was a charismatic local activist, to death, along with 8 other people, for protesting Shell's extraction projects. And this is something that happens all the time. Every year, hundreds of land defenders, so in people who are environmental activists defending their land, their homes, they are killed. They're killed by criminal gangs at the pay of people who benefit from these projects. They're killed by corporate thugs and private security, and this just goes on. This is what I'd call modern colonialism.
Rosanna, I think you had a point.
Yeah, just to add to that, right today, we've got colonialism happening in Canada. So I don't know if you know about, there's a pipeline that the Canadian government and corporations are trying to build over Indigenous lands, and the Indigenous people are fighting back. They're blocking railways. They're fighting together with the non-Indigenous people in Canada. This is like a very real example of solidarity. And here in London, actually, there's protests going on. People have blocked the entrance of one of the offices of the corporations that are linked to this pipeline. And so, we can't just say that colonialism is a thing of the past. I think now we see neo-colonialism, which links together corporations and governments, and together they are still trying to destroy indigenous lands and still trying to extract fossil fuels.
A little known fact about the colonial era is that, of course, European nations literally and physically took over different countries in the global south. But this takeover was often led by corporations then, as it is now. So while now we don't have formal colonies, we do have the same extraction of materials, resources and money. And this isn't a sort of side concern. To give you an example of the scale of this, all of the under 30 oil companies on the FTSE 100 stock exchange metric, their combined value on the stock exchange is more than the GDP of the entire of sub-Saharan Africa. These companies, fossil fuel companies that is, are part of the most profitable industry the world has ever seen. And they got this money from subjugating the global south just as much as they got it from oil and gas.
Rosanna, what would you say global justice is then?
Global justice is recognizing that there are these systems, capitalism and colonialism, that are creating the climate crisis, are creating a crisis of poverty, also have created the so-called migrant crisis. So global justice would mean justice for these people who are most affected by these systems. It means getting to the root causes of how these systems were created and what they're doing, and fighting with the people and listening to the people who are the most affected, standing in solidarity with them. So yeah, we'll say social justice, economic justice, and trade justice would be included in this whole global justice, and climate justice, of course.
And what would you say to people, just as a little follow-on question, who say, hang on, we're trying to deal with a climate crisis. How can we deal with everything all at once?
I would say you can't deal with the climate crisis without dealing with these systems of power. If we don't change now, we will all maybe face extinction. Obviously, some people more than others will be more, affected. And so if we have so much wealth here in the north, we need to deal with seriously redistributing it in a fair way, not just through, I would say, neo-colonial systems as well, like the IMF and the World Bank. But we have to fight together. Like, if you are here in the global north, you need to be putting pressure on your governments to really redistribute the wealth. Also, migration is a form of reparations. If people are coming from countries that have been affected by colonialism and they are coming to the global north, that is a very tangible way that they are getting back the wealth that has been stolen. I think it is up to people in the global north to stand in solidarity, which also means standing together, also just getting more knowledgeable about it. We're not really taught about colonialism in school. We have the wonderful internet, which can teach you more, but you also have talks like this. There's also workshops, there's amazing books that you can look into. Maybe we'll be talking about that more.
Yeah, definitely.
The climate crisis and the way it's going to affect the global south is absolutely catastrophic. And global inequality plays into it heavily. So if you look at the example of Bangladesh and the Netherlands, both countries are sitting under sea level, basically. But one country is thinking about building dikes, even floating cities, to try and stave off flooding. And the other country of 160 million people, that being Bangladesh, these people have no protection. Their livelihoods will be gone. And we're going to see in the next few decades an estimated 500 million refugees that will be caused by the climate crisis. And if you think about how Europe has dealt so badly, criminally, with Syrian refugees, only a few million of whom have actually tried to make it to Europe, then think about what we're going to, how the world is going to be able to accommodate and actually save people who are going to have to flee their homes in the hundreds of millions. We really have to think about more issues than just ones we typically associate with climate and environmentalism.
I think, like Naomi Klein says it quite well. She's got a book, This Changes Everything, and she says, actually, obviously it's a dark time, but let's see the light in it. This is a time to change everything. As long as we open our eyes to it and we have conversations like this, we can get to the root of tackling it. We can deal with all these things together. But I think if we have a movement that isn't recognizing that, then we aren't going to tackle anything at the end of the day.
All the corporations that are doing this to the climate and wrecking the global south are headquartered in the UK. Like the extraordinary amount of extractive industries, metals and mining industries, law firms that cover for them, lobbying agencies that do their dirty work in politics, an extraordinary amount of them are headquartered in London and the United States. Like, we have a special duty to do our part in the global fight for climate justice.
I think that gets us quite nicely to this term that is floated around quite a lot as well, called green colonialism.
Yeah. Well, I guess not many people in Extinction Rebellion maybe might know what green colonialism is. So green colonialism is looking at a world where we transition from fossil fuels, but we don't deal with the ongoing colonialism. So if we do transition from fossil fuels, the amount of renewable energies technologies we'll need to create and build and mass produce will increase the amount of mining in the world, from mining about 79 billion tons of resources to 167 billion tons of resources all this mining and metal extraction is done usually on land stolen from people in the global south. And the same corporations that are causing half of all global emissions in extractivism and extracting minerals and resources are looking to take more land in the global south by force if necessary, as they sometimes do, in order to build bigger lithium mines for coltan and whatever metals we need, because they're trying to take advantage of the need to transition from fossil fuels. And if we don't check their power, we're going to transition to a world in which we might not have a dependency on fossil fuels, but we will still be destroying the environment and we will still be destroying the global south.
I think that links into what we said at the beginning, which is capitalism and colonialism leads to the climate crisis, and you need to deal with both those systems. We need to deal with capitalism and its insatiable need for growth. There are alternative ways of looking at how we can measure progress. So at the moment we measure progress in GDP and constantly needing to grow our economy. There is this theory called degrowth. Jason Hickel talks about that a lot, and it's talking about how we can measure human progress in a way that isn't reliant on continually making a profit. And that's the issue. If we just have these companies, these corporations that led to that helped create the climate crisis, we just let them deal with making renewables, they're continually going to need more land to have the wind turbines or the solar panels if we don't also deal with the fact that we don't need to be continually making things. We don't need to be continually consuming. There are other ways of living.
So I think it's really great that you brought that up, because I think as well, with Extinction Rebellion, it's not just the climate emergency, it's the climate and ecological emergency. Having the biodiversity aspect so important, but it needs to have that global justice element of it as well. And Cameron, you're also involved in something called Global Justice Rebellion. What is it, and how are you involved?
So Global Justice Rebellion is actually a coalition of groups, and they were brought together by a need to engage with XR. So some groups are part of XR, like XR Youth and Disabled Rebels, others are not. I'm one of the coordinators for Global Justice Rebellion, and we basically we act at the same time as XR's rebellions. We sometimes coordinate with XR, but we seek to embed global justice and solidarity with the Global South into everything we do and the demands we make, because we realise that's what's necessary to fight the climate crisis.
So as a follow-on to that, what are the lacks that you see within XR at the moment from your angle?
Well, there's been a lot of critique of XR, but one thing that we have obviously just been talking about a lot is that we need a demand that focuses on justice and on the need to change the systems that are really causing the climate crisis. So in XR USA, they've added a fourth demand, and I've got the text here. The highlights are that the demand is for a just transition that prioritizes the most vulnerable people, establishes reparations and remediations, and repairs the effects of ongoing ecocide. So this is about repairing hundreds of years of environmental injustice and that aspect of colonialism, and that if we don't do and don't tackle, we'll simply continue.
And do you both within the Global Rebellion and in your other work, do you ever look at the UK and how racism, for example, affects the system even within the UK, which is itself a ramification of colonialism?
So basically we can see that the climate crisis affects the global south the most, but we also have seen that in the UK, I think in London particularly, black people will be more likely to be affected by air pollution than their white counterparts. Black Lives Matter UK did a brilliant protest a few years ago at London City Airport, where they shut down the airport for a while to highlight this, to say that racism also continues in the UK, and also because Black Lives Matter mostly focused on police violence, and they wanted to highlight this correlation that it is the system that is generally being racist, and they wanted to say that the climate crisis is a racist crisis, and we can see that with the global South being most affected by the climate crisis, and by people from the global South in the global North being most affected by the climate crisis.
And I suppose that the XR policy that we first had as a way of rebelling by getting arrested also is in a kind of sensitive point for that.
I think it, talking to a lot of my friends and seeing it myself firsthand, it is very alienating for people of colour, having this whole love of the police tactic in XR, because the police are institutionally racist. You are far more likely to get stopped and searched if you are black in the UK, and also there have been lots of deaths in police custody, which are mostly black and brown people being killed by the police. And so when you see, if you have experienced police violence, or you know that you could be experiencing police violence because of the colour of your skin, and you go to a protest where people are saying, we love you, we love the police, it just makes you feel unwelcome, really. It makes you feel like these people don't understand where I'm coming from, and they're on the side of the oppressor. So that is a really big critique that we have, me and my friends, me and Cameron have, also our youth network, Our Future Now, which are part of Global Justice Rebellion. That's why we feel like we can't fully be part of XR until it really addresses these issues that are so alienating for people of colour.
So would you suggest that we change strategies, or do we, what could be kind of a solution for XR?
So I think when we've thought about this in Global Justice Rebellion, we've thought that there has to be a diversity of tactics. Relying on any one tactic, if that one tactic's exclusionary, is not good, but also isn't good strategically. So we need to have multiple different tactics that aim to put the pressure on the government.
So like what?
So one thing that particularly inspires me is, why can't we have a mass mobilisation here in London that is linked with mobilisations in the Global South, one which targets the headquarters of international finance and corporations, and one which targets their actual operations in the Global South. We can think of many different ways to incorporate non-arrestable and other creative actions that also incorporate global justice and bring in far more people than we would be able to do currently. For some people, it's hard to feel like they care a lot about groups in which across the world they don't know a lot about. But if we begin to build those links, like we've been doing in the Youth Network with video calls with activists in the Global South, this is something that can build up for a whole new kind of movement.
So what are other groups doing about global justice, both nationally and abroad?
So one example I like to think about is the Kurdish region of Rojava in Syria. So this is a region of Syria inhabited by an ethnic minority called the Kurds. And for the last few decades, the government of Syria has systematically underdeveloped the region. It's kicked people off their land and replaced it with mass plantations owned by Syrian Arabs. So it was a form of internal colonization. During the Syrian civil war, the Kurdish people created their own zone of the country, and they were able to sort of self-determine their government for the first time in I think ever in that region. And in Rojava right now, you have special forms of local democracy special forms of feminist organisations and an economy that's mainly controlled by cooperatives. So that means all of us together. But at the same time, they're planting thousands and thousands of trees because the people are in charge there, not corporations and not distant governments. This kind of organisation really gives me hope for the future.
I have, going back to the kind of green colonialism idea, though, I've also heard of bad practice in that area where, for example, in order to, increase carbon sinks, then parts of forests have been taken over and the indigenous people have thrown off. So that obviously isn't what we're looking for. Do you have another example, Rosanna? Of good practice, I think.
Good practice. Have bad ones.
Okay, give us some bad ones.
Yeah, there's examples of carbon offsetting. So corporations essentially like buying up lands. I think in Brazil, there's been examples in Uganda as well, buying up forest lands and being like, oh, we've got to protect it. We've got to like buy more trees.
So are these people who have they've gone for what we in XR might think of as a greenwash by saying we're going to, as a corporation, go carbon neutral. Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so they're taking up indigenous people's lands, and they're saying, oh, we're decreasing our carbon emissions, but really you're just displacing people. You're taking away people's lands. So that is an example of green colonialism. I also wanted to talk about, I guess, what groups are doing and what we can do more of. And yeah, for an example that we're doing with Our Future Now, the Youth Network, is climate justice workshops. And we actually ran a training quite recently, and we had people from XR there who are setting up new groups and saying that, I know that XR does this like obligatory trainings. But yeah, one of the ideas is to have this kind of climate justice training, so it's not just on tactics, but also understanding when you're saying we're fighting for climate justice, what does that mean? And in these workshops, we really dig deep into what a capitalism and colonialism equals the climate crisis. And yeah, by spreading that knowledge, by really decolonizing our minds, we can be building this future that we want to see.
Brilliant. Cameron, your positive future, what does it look like?
So, I mean, whenever I hear things like this, it is scary and frankly demotivating. What the hell can we do if it's not just climate, but also colonialism, all these things that have existed for hundreds of years? But I always also think that because the climate crisis affects so many people in so many ways, it just means that as environmental activists, we have so many allies that we can call on. We can call on migrants' rights activists, we can call on trade unionists, we can call on the whole lot, and we can create a coalition that has a lot of power. And in terms of like what we'd want to gear ourselves towards, when we solve the climate crisis, we're looking, and we solve it properly, and talking about global justice, we're looking at a future where we all have bountiful free time. We don't have to make things we don't need. We have free public transport and public services, so it's easier for us not to use cars. We have community-owned local energy, and we respect each other. We don't oppress each other, and we've made a world that's really built for us, not for profits.
So, Rosanna, if people are really interested in getting involved with Global Justice Now, what can they do?
So they can go to our website, globaljustice.org.uk, and they can also follow us on Twitter, so that's @globaljusticeuk. And yes, you can find out more about our workshops if you want to come along, if you want to also do a training and then run a workshop. We're going to be doing some workshops in Camden soon, and we'll be going across the country as well. So yeah, check us out.
Thank you so much. It's been really fascinating. I've been really touched and moved by some of the stories and some of the issues that you've brought forward. Would you mind thanking our guests? Thank you.
To finish the episode, we want to share with you some sounds from around the world to highlight what it's like to be part of XR Actions globally. We did an international call out to XR groups and received sounds from XR Actions from all over the world, which Phil Smith wove together into the piece you're about to hear. So we've got Argentina, Brazil, Ecuador, Pakistan, Israel, Sri Lanka, Australia, South Africa, India, Ghana, and Finland. So close your eyes and imagine you are surrounded by an Extinction Rebellion action. Imagine flags, colours, loads of people. This is what you would hear.
I plead with you to claim your future and fight for your right to live, because this fight, it doesn't concern only those of us gathered here today. It concerns every man, every woman, every child, cat, dog, fish and ant that lives on this planet. This is what democracy looks like.
Hi all, this protest is happening in New Delhi and soon we'll start marching towards Ministry of Climate Change, Forest and Environment. Much power to Delhi rebels.
It's World Youth Day. The conversation for 7 days, the environment for the food is an enjoy in ourselves.
למשרד האנרגיה להפסיק לקדם בניית תחנות כוח מונעות בגז וסולר ומסוכנות לבריאות בסמיכות לאזור מגוריהם. משרד האנרגיה משווק את הגז כטבעי ונקי, אבל האמת היא שגז הוא דלק מעובד, שהדליפה והשריפה שלו גורמים לזיהום ופליטה של גזי חממה, ושנמצא בקו אחד עם הפחם מבחינת השפעתו על שינוי האקלים. יש חלופה נקייה יותר, לא מזיקה לבריאות שלנו וכלכלית יותר, והיא מצויה אצלנו בשפע. קוראים לה אנרגיית שמש.
Por favor, entiéndanos. Es que necesitamos seguir generando ganancia para nuestros inversores. Por eso necesitamos sacar gas y petróleo. Necesitamos seguir sacando gas y petróleo. ¡Viva el fracking! ¡Viva el fracking! Gracias, queridos argentinos, por permitirnos seguir destruyendo el mundo con fracking, con extracción de gas y petróleo, a costa de toda la vida, a costa de todos los ecosistemas, de las nuevas generaciones. Gracias. Sigamos, por favor, avanzando juntos. Paguen los impuestos, no se olviden.
Olha o que eles fizeram com a nossa reserva. 2 anos que a gente estava lutando para preservar isso aqui, e agora vem os banners negros e fica fogo na nossa aldeia. Se não bastasse a Vale matar nosso rio, matar o nosso fonte de vida, agora vieram e puseram fogo na nossa reserva. Nós não vamos nos calar. Amanhã nós vamos fechar a pista e queremos a mídia aqui para nos defender.
As a 15-year-old, I am terrified of what my future holds. Every day I am surrounded with images of despair, of ruins, war and apocalypse. The effects of the climate emergency haunt my future and my present. the phantom whisperings of famine, of an ecological collapse and a breakdown of society as we know it. These side effects of burning fossil fuels are what clouds my career and my life. The burden of the climate emergency falls onto those that are fighting it the loudest. The money of the coal and gas industry is covered in the blood and tears of my generation and generations to come.
Always will be Aboriginal land. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land.
My name is Raisa Nur Mohammed. I am 17 years old and I have a message for the Department of Environmental Affairs and the rest of the South African government. The climate emergency is getting worse and worse. People and animals are dying. We need to act fast, and we need to act now. South Africa is already feeling the effects of climate change. The heat and droughts we are experiencing as a result of global warming. And over the next few years, the weather conditions will get more extreme. We need to do everything we can to combat the effects of climate change.
Make the planet green again! Make the planet green again! Make the planet green again! Make the planet green again!
20 y 27 de septiembre, huelga mundial por el clima. ¿Es ahora o nunca?
I'm sorry, my friends. I didn't want to stop you when you were having such a fine time. But this is an emergency. Your house is on fire.
Não é simplesmente uma mudança de clima. O que nós estamos vivendo é o assassinato de nossos povos, pelo genocídio, pelo etnocídio e também pelo ecocídio.
So this is a call for action. This is us saying that our future will not be traded for the profits of big companies. This is us saying that this is our life and we will fight for it.
The trees, and the river, yeah, and the other flag, the fire.
When you were having such a hard time. Emergency.
It's the only way that our governments will listen to us. And we are willing to make sacrifices.
Everything we see today, the melting glaciers, the plastic-filled oceans, and the pollution-clogged air, it's just like a glimpse. It's a preview of the future and what's to come. And we've had enough ambitious speeches, and we have enough climate scientists who've told us what we have to do.
And so we have to rise up now.